The signal lasted 4 seconds. That was enough. 4 seconds of tightly compressed xenoband transmission bounced off the inner moon of Kepler 442, and Soren Vash had it triangulated before the ghost of it had finished dying in the dark. She sat in the cramped operations bay of the INS Perseverance and stared at the decoded header until her coffee went cold. And then she made the call she had been dreading for 3 years. "It's him," she said. "He's back." Silence on the line. Then Admiral Reyes, 12 light minutes away in the orbital command ring, said the one word that told her everything she needed to know about how the brass was going to handle this. "Impossible." Soren Vash was 26 years old and had never met Commander Elliot Crane, the man they called the Ghost, the man who had allegedly dismantled the Vreth invasion corridor single-handed during the First Contact War, and then vanished into a classified debrief that nobody ever came out of talking. She knew him only as a ghost story, tactical legend. What the instructors at Fleet Academy said when they wanted to scare third-year cadets into paying attention. He was dead, they said. Had to be. Nobody survived what Crane survived, and nobody who did survive it came out the same. The signal said otherwise. Soren pulled her coffee cup close and let it warm her hands, and thought about the 4 seconds of transmission, the way the carrier wave had been structured, the old cipher buried in the modulation. Pre-war fleet encoding, the kind that hadn't been used since Crane's generation. Old habits, the bones of a man underneath all that noise. She thought about the secondary header she hadn't reported yet, the one that made her stomach drop. The 3 syllables encoded in the tail end of the signal that translated roughly from Vreth tactical band as, "I have returned. I bring the winning move." She thought about what the Vreth high strategist was capable of. She thought about what it meant if Crane was alive, and what it meant if he wasn't. Then she filed the secondary header under personal observation, sealed the log entry with her own biometric, and went to find the one person she trusted to hear it. Lieutenant Kai Morrow had the kind of face that made people underestimate him, which was the same thing that had kept him alive through 14 months of boarding actions against Vreth cruisers. He was 22, had a gap between his front teeth, and laughed at jokes that weren't funny yet, getting there before everyone else. He was also the best electronic warfare specialist on any ship Soren had ever served on, which was why she trusted him, and also why she was mildly afraid of him. She found him in the machine bay, elbows deep in a Vreth signal scrambler they'd pulled off a drifting drone 3 weeks back. He had grease on his chin and was humming something under his breath. Some old flat-chored melody she didn't recognize. "Close the hatch," she said. He looked up, read her face, and closed the hatch. She told him everything. The signal, the cipher, the secondary header. When she got to the part about the winning move, he stopped humming and sat very still. "He could be compromised," Morrow said. "Could be. If the Vreth had him for 3 years." "I know. The high strategist doesn't do things halfway, Commander." "Shh. You know what they're capable of. The Vreth don't take prisoners for information. They take them for rewriting." The word landed in the room the way it always did. Rewriting. Fleet Academy had a whole semester on it. Now, taught in the 3rd year, mandatory, because the First Contact War had produced enough case studies. The Vreth High Strategist, a being with no name that humans could pronounce, referred to in intelligence files as Subject Zero, had a particular genius for it, the deep revision of human neural architecture, slow and patient and precise, leaving the original personality as a shell while installing something new behind the eyes. The victim walked and talked and laughed the same, but underneath, in the bones of the decision-making, in the reflex pathways, in the places you didn't audit because you trusted them, something else was running the controls. "I know what they're capable of," Soren said. "That's why I came to you." Morrow picked up a small component from the Vreth scrambler and turned it over in his fingers. The alien metal caught the light oddly, refracting it in a spectrum human eyes weren't designed for. He'd noticed that the first time he'd touched Vreth VAR hardware, the way their technology was built, around the assumption that everyone who used it would perceive the world the same way the Vreth did, which was the thing about them that scared him most, not the weapons. not the ships. The arrogance of a species that had never seriously entertained the possibility of genuine difference. "You want me to verify the signal," he said. "I want to know if it's really him." "And if it is?" Soren looked at the hatch. "Then we go get him. And if he's been rewritten." She didn't answer for a long moment. Through the hull she could hear the gentle hum of the ship's drives. The constant, low voice of the Perseverance going about its business, keeping them alive in the dark between stars. She thought about what Reyes would say. She thought about the 53 personnel aboard this ship who would have to vote with their lives on whatever she decided in the next 10 seconds. "Then we figure that out when we get there," she said. "Same way we figure out everything." Morrow turned the alien component over again. "You mean by improvising? I mean by being human." The Vreth had been winning the war on paper for 11 years. It was not a matter of debate. It was a matter of careful, documented, mathematically verifiable fact. And it was the fact that Fleet Command kept carefully documented, mathematically failing to communicate to the general public. Because the alternative was something that nobody in Fleet Command had the particular courage to say out loud. The Vreth outmassed humanity's combined fleet by a factor of 11. They were faster and more durable, and had been a spacefaring civilization for 6,000 years before the first human had chipped flint into an arrowhead. Their biology was not entirely carbon-based. Their command structure was a distributed consciousness that did not lose cohesion under stress the way a chain of command did, that did not argue or hesitate or grieve. They did not have the word for retreat in their oldest languages. The concept had been introduced to their vocabulary by contact with humanity, which they found philosophically baffling, and yet humanity was still here. This was the thing that Subject Zero, the high strategist, the patient and brilliant and deeply ancient being at the center of the Vreth War Council, kept returning to in its calculations. The math said humanity should have been absorbed in the first 3 years. The math was wrong. The math was wrong in the first year, and the 3rd year, and the 7th year, and it kept being wrong in ways that the models predicted would stop being wrong. And Subject Zero had been spending 11 years trying to understand why. The answer, the high strategist had eventually concluded, was not military. Humanity's technology was inferior, their numbers smaller, their biology fragile and short-sighted, and prone to a baffling array of catastrophic emotional responses at inopportune moments. Their greatest tactical minds were brilliant but inconsistent. Their supply lines were inefficient. Their politics were a perpetual catastrophe. But they had something that the Vreth did not have a precise word for. The closest translation was Mokith, the tendency to act in ways that are optimal in the context of a system that does not yet exist. The humans were always building towards something that wasn't there yet, always fighting as though some better version of the situation was real, always betting on the future the way the Vreth bet on the present. Subject Zero had decided that the only way to beat this was to become it. That was what the rewriting program was for. That was what Elliot Crane had been for. They found the signal's origin point at the edge of the Kepler exclusion zone, a region of space that Fleet Command had quietly stopped sending ships into after losing 4 of them in 2 years. Perseverance crossed the boundary at half thrust, running silent, and for 17 hours, nothing happened, except that Morrow sat at his console and did things to the carrier wave analysis that Soren didn't entirely follow, and the rest of the crew pretended to go about their duties while actually paying extremely close attention to everything. On the 18th hour, the hail came in. The voice that came through the speakers had the right timbre, the right cadence, the slight hesitation before multi-syllable words that was a characteristic of rapid second language acquisition in mid-life, which Crane had done with 3 Vreth dialects during the war. It said his name. It said his rank. It said he had been a prisoner for 37 months and was broadcasting from a decommissioned Vreth way station and needed extraction. It sounded exactly like him. Soren listened to the whole transmission twice, with her hands flat on the console. Morrow was watching her from across the operations bay. She had heard recordings of Crane from the war. The Fleet Academy archives had them, the tactical debriefs, the mission logs, the one interview he'd given to a civilian reporter 12 days before his disappearance. She had listened to them many times. The voice on the transmission matched all of them. "He sounds scared," Ensign Farrow said from the back of the bay. "Course he does," said Lieutenant Okafor, the ship's surgeon. "He's been a prisoner for 3 years." "He sounds like he's supposed to sound scared," Farrow said. The room went quiet. "She's right," Morrow said. He was looking at his console, not at anyone. "The stress patterns are correct. The voice crack on extraction. The breathing rate, it's within 2% of the profiles from the archive recordings." "So it's him," Okafor said. "So it's been modeled very carefully," Morrow said. "Those are different things." Soren pushed back from the console and stood up and looked at the ceiling for a moment, which was her habit when she was deciding something. Crew knew not to say anything when she did this. "Bring us in," she said. "Docking approach. Quarantine protocol. If he's been rewritten," Farrow started. "Then we contain it aboard the ship, and we deal with it," Soren said. "He's Fleet. We don't leave Fleet behind." There was a pause. "Commander," Okafor said carefully, "if Subject Zero put what I think it put in him, containing it may not be." "I said we deal with it," Soren said. "We've been dealing with things we weren't supposed to be able to handle for 11 years. Not stopping now." The waste station was a dead thing, Vreth construction from the early war period, its primary functions long since cannibalized for parts. Morrow went in first with a 2-person security detail, which was the protocol, and Soren came in behind them against the protocol and the explicit objections of everyone with an opinion. She knew it was him the moment she saw him. That was the terrifying part. He was sitting on the floor of the waste station's single pressurized chamber with his back against the wall and his knees pulled up. And he looked exactly like the photographs in the Fleet Academy archives. Wide shoulders, gray streaked hair cut close, the scar along his jaw from the engagement at Vega 3 that had been documented in at least 7 tactical histories. He looked up when they came in, and his face moved through something complicated. Relief and wariness and something underneath that she couldn't name yet. And he said, "I was starting to think nobody was coming." It was the right thing to say. That was the first thing she noticed. "What's the secondary authentication code?" Morrow said. His hand was near his sidearm. Crane recited it without hesitation. 12 characters, rotating cipher, the kind that would have been updated quarterly. This one had been issued 39 months ago, just before his disappearance. "That code hasn't been valid for 3 years, Morrow said. "I've been gone for 3 years, Crane said. He was looking at Soren. "You're Vash. I saw your name in the transmission index. They showed me the fleet personnel files." He paused. "The Vreth showed me. They wanted me to know who might come." "Why would they want you to know that?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because they wanted me to trust you." The chamber was silent. The recycled air moved. Morrow's hand didn't move away from his sidearm. "I need you to know something," Crane said. "Before we do whatever comes next." They tried. 3 years, they tried everything. The high-bandwidth neural sequencing, the layered personality overlays, the stratagem protocols. I know what those feel like. I know what the rewrite feels like when it starts. He looked at his own hands. "They got partway in. I want you to know that. I'm not going to tell you I came out clean, because I don't know if that's true. What I know is that there's something they wanted me to say to you, and I haven't said it yet. And it's been eating at me for 3 days while I waited for you, and that's the thing you should be most afraid of." Soren waited. "They want me to tell you," Crane said slowly, "that they have a weapon, an orbital platform. They've been building it for 4 years. It can target any point on Earth's surface from outside our engagement envelope." He met her eyes. "And they want me to give you the activation codes to prove they're not bluffing. The codes I was carrying when I went in, the ones Subject Zero extracted." The room was very still. "But that's not actually what I want to tell you," Crane said. "What I want to tell you is that I know where the platform is. And I know that Subject Zero has never, in 6,000 years of Vreth history, handed a human being a winning move without a reason." It took Soren 48 hours to stop sleeping and start thinking. Problem wasn't the weapon platform. The problem wasn't even Crane. She'd run every verification protocol Morrow could design, and he came back clean, or clean enough, which she was increasingly convinced was a meaningful distinction. Problem was Subject Zero. The high strategist had been running this war for 11 years with a patience and intelligence that made Fleet Command's most decorated admirals look like they were playing drafts. It didn't make mistakes. It didn't leave threads loose. If it had sent Crane back with a gift, the platform location, the confirmation of the weapon's existence, the implicit invitation to come destroy it, then the gift was a gambit, and the gambit was a test, and the test was of something specific. It wants to see how we handle it, Morrow said, on the third night, when the rest of the crew was trying to sleep. Yes. It's been studying us for 11 years, and it still doesn't understand the Mokathir thing. Building toward what isn't there yet thing. The improvising thing. Yeah. Morrow picked up his coffee cup, looked at it, set it down. So it engineers a situation where the variables are controlled, where it can observe how we process an impossible problem, and when we solve it, it learns. And it doesn't make the same mistake again. Right. So the question is, Morrow said, whether we can afford to not go. Because if we don't go, the weapon platform is real and Earth is real and we're real. And if we do go, Soren said, we give it exactly what it unless. She looked at him. Unless we go in a way it's not modeling, Morrow said. He was smiling his slightly ahead of the joke smile. Unless we're not the thing it thinks we are. Explain. He turned the Vreth Scrambler component over in his hand. He'd been carrying it for days, she'd noticed, the way some people carried stones. It's modeled Crane. It's modeled fleet protocols. It's modeled tactical doctrine going back 11 years. Got petabytes of human behavioral data. He set the component down. It's been modeling the humans it understands. The ones who were trained for this. The ones who fight the way you're supposed to fight. He looked up. What it hasn't modeled is me. The plan was either brilliant or suicidal. Irk. In Soren's experience, these were usually the same plan, viewed from different ends of the timeline. Morrow spent 18 hours doing something to the Vreth Scrambler that he described as teaching it to lie to itself, and that Soren declined to examine too carefully. Cranes sat with him for most of it, which Soren watched with her hand near her sidearm for the first 6 hours, and then stopped watching because it was making Crane uncomfortable and he was being useful. What emerged from those 18 hours was a signal modifier that could, in Morrow's words, convince the platform's targeting system that it's pointing at an entirely different star. The alien technology, built on the assumption of a shared perceptual framework, had a specific vulnerability. It could not process the possibility that its reference architecture was wrong. You couldn't hack the weapon. But you could make the weapon not understand what it was looking at. Faro stared at the device. That's not how targeting systems work. Vreth targeting systems, Morrow said cheerfully. How is that different? Their targeting systems assume consensus reality. One set of coordinates, one objective truth about where things are. He held up the modifier. This tells it, there are 3 suns in this system, none of which are the one it's supposed to be targeting. The system isn't equipped to resolve that contradiction. It'll go into verification loop. For how long? I have no idea, Morrow said. Could be 30 seconds, be 30 days. He paused. I've never tested it. You've never. I made it up this afternoon. Faro looked at Soren with an expression that said, clearly and without ambiguity, this is how we die. Soren found that she was not precisely afraid. She was something more specific than afraid. She was standing at the edge of a thing that had not yet happened. And the thing that had not yet happened might be a catastrophe, or it might be the pivot point of an 11-year war. And she was about to jump toward it either way, because the alternative was to stand still and let Subject Zero finish modeling her. Go in 2 hours, she said. The platform was real. That was the first thing. It hung in high orbit above the exclusion zone's inner boundary. A Vreth structure of the new generation. Angular and wrong-looking to human eyes. built with their particular gift for geometries that implied spaces that shouldn't be there. The Perseverance came in on minimum signature at the approach vector Crane had identified. And, for 43 minutes, nothing shot at them. "It's letting us in," Faro said. "It's watching us," Crane said. He was standing at the back of the operations bay, which he had been given clearance to enter 22 hours ago after the third verification scan came back negative. He was looking at the platform-to-plow schematic with the expression of a man who had looked at it before. From the inside, Subject Zero does this. It observes. It waits for you to commit. To what? To whatever strategy you've chosen. It wants to see the strategy before it responds. So it can model it. So it can counter it, Crane said. Yes, Soren looked at Morrow. Morrow had the modifier in his hand, not yet deployed, turning it over in his fingers. The way he turned everything over in his fingers, reading it. He looked up and she saw something in his face. She recognized, not confidence exactly, but the specific human quality of having thought about a thing so hard and so long that you had moved through fear and come out somewhere stranger and calmer on the other side. "One thing I need you to understand," Morrow said, "is that this is going to look to any external observer like an absolutely idiotic thing to do." "That's comforting," Crane said. "That's intentional," Morrow said. The breath response was immediate and, for Subject Zero, uncharacteristic in one specific way. It was loud. Platform lit up its active targeting. The carrier waves flooded the local volume, and Subject Zero itself, broadcasting through the platform's command array, a thing that Fleet Intelligence had no prior record of. A direct communication from the high strategist to a human vessel. Opened a channel. What came through was not a voice, exactly. Human hearing registered it as sound. But what the brain processed was something larger. A sense of geological patience, of perspective accumulated across millennia, of a mind so vast and so certain of its own correctness that it had stopped needing the particular kind of vigilance that doubt requires. Soren had read descriptions of this, and the descriptions had not prepared her. "You have come," the high strategist said. "We have," Soren said. Her voice was steady. She was faintly impressed with her own voice. "You came because you could not come. Your optimization patterns required the attempt. This is the quality I have been studying." A pause. "You are the Mokith-ver species. You act as though what is not yet real is already real. Is that a compliment?" "It is a problem," Subject Zero said. "It is the problem I have spent 11 of your years solving. I have modeled 12,000 combat scenarios. I have mapped your decision trees in environments of perfect information and complete uncertainty. I have mapped the ways your biology creates errors that become, in aggregate, something that is not an error. I understand how you do what you do." "Then you know you should let us go," Soren said. "I know the opposite," Subject Zero said. "I know that the device your engineer has built will not function. I know this because I understand the physics he is applying. The targeting systems reference architecture is not vulnerable to contradictory input in the way he believes. He has spent 18 hours building something that cannot work." Morrow's face did not change. "You are right," Soren said. This was apparently not the expected response. There was a pause before Subject Zero spoke again. "You admit this. I admit he built something that can't work in the way he intended." "Yes." Soren pulled her coffee cup close. It was cold. She drank from it anyway. "Can I ask you something?" Another pause, longer this time. "Seed. You've been modeling us for 11 years. You've got all that data. You know how we make decisions. You know our error patterns. You know the way we optimize for futures that don't exist yet." She set the cup down. "In 11 years of modeling, have you ever encountered a case where the thing we built didn't work but the trying still mattered?" Silence. "Here's what I think," Soren said. "I think you've never been surprised. Not once, not in 6,000 years. I think that's what you don't have a word for. Not the improvising, not the future building. I think what you don't have a word for is being surprised. And I think that's what Crane was for, and what the weapon platform is for, and what this conversation is for. You're not trying to end the war. You're trying to understand why you can't." The silence lasted 11 seconds. Soren counted. The device your engineer has built will not disrupt the targeting architecture, Subject Zero said. You knew this before you came. We suspected it. You came anyway. We always come anyway. The high strategist's response was 15 seconds of silence, and then something that the comms array translated inadequately as, "This is the thing I could not model." And then from the operations bay's secondary console, Morrow said quietly, "Commander." She looked over. He was holding up the Vreth Scrambler component, the piece he'd been carrying for days, the one he'd turned over in his fingers 100 times. He set it on the console next to the modifier he'd built. "The device doesn't work the way I said it did," he said. "I know that. I knew it when I built it." He tapped the Scrambler component. "This is what works. This is the piece I pulled out of the Vreth drone 3 weeks ago. It's their own technology, their own reference architecture. And when you plug it into the platform's targeting system from the outside, it doesn't confuse the system." He met her eyes. "Shh. It tells the system it's already completed its mission. Vreth targeting systems have a single-use confirmation protocol. They're designed to prevent accidental second strikes. Once they believe they've fired, they stand down. And Subject Zero doesn't know this because nobody's ever gotten close enough to try it," Morrow said. "Because they never needed to encrypt that vulnerability. They never imagined anyone would figure it out by accident while examining salvage." "While humming a tune in the machine bay," Soren said. "While humming a tune in the machine bay," Morrow agreed. She looked at the main display, where the platform hung in silent, dangerous orbit. She looked at Crane, who was watching Morrow with the particular expression of a man who had spent 3 years in Vreth captivity and was now watching a 22-year-old with grease on his chin do the thing that 11 years of fleet intelligence had failed to do. "Subject Zero," she said. "You still listening?" The presence came back through the comms array, that geological patience, that vast and ancient certainty. "Yes. I want you to know that we're about to shut down your weapon platform," Soren said. "Not because we outmaneuvered you. Not because we were smarter. We're gonna shut it down because Kai Morrow pulls things apart when he's bored, and he happened to pull apart one of your drones. And he happened to find something interesting, and he held on to it for 3 weeks because it felt like the kind of thing that might matter later." She paused. "That's the thing you can't model. Not the tactics, not the strategy. The 3 weeks of carrying a piece of metal around in your pocket because it feels like it might be important someday." Silence. "That's the thing we are," she said. "That's the whole thing." Morrow went out in a suit with the component in his hand, and he was terrified, in the specific, focused way that she recognized from the boarding actions. Not paralyzed, just honest about what was happening, metabolizing it instead of pretending it wasn't there. He found the access port in 40 minutes. He plugged in the component. Targeting array's confirmation lights went green. The platform stood down. Subject Zero did not fire, did not pursue, did not respond further. A very long time, 7 minutes, which in combat time was geological. Nothing happened at all. Then Crane said, from the back of the operations bay, "It's thinking." "It's always thinking," Faro said. "No," Crane said. It's thinking differently. I know what it sounds like from the inside when it's running a model. This is different. This is," he paused, reaching for a word. "This is what it sounds like when it doesn't have a model." The quiet lasted 3 more minutes. Then the platform's full active targeting array cycled down. Not the weapon, just the targeting, just the watching. And Subject Zero spoke, for the last time through the comms array, in a transmission that fleet intelligence would spend 2 years analyzing and arguing about, and ultimately filing under, inconclusive, the Mokathvar quality. It said. "I had categorized it as a tactical anomaly. I had modeled it as a vulnerability in your optimization architecture. The tendency to waste resources on uncertain futures have been incorrect. It is not a flaw in the system. It is the system a pause. I have spent 6,000 years not being surprised. I find that I do not know what to do with this D." Then the channel closed. They took the long way home. That was Soren's call, and nobody argued with it. Crane spent most of the journey in the machine bay with Morrow, which surprised everyone except Soren. She could hear them, sometimes through the hatch. Morrow explaining some piece of salvaged Vreth hardware. Crane asking questions in the patient and thorough way of a man who understood that the war was going to keep being won in machine bays by 22-year-olds who hummed to themselves. And who wanted to understand how that happened. She thought that was probably the most useful thing Crane was going to do for the next 20 years. She thought that was probably fine. On the fourth day of transit, Morrow knocked on her cabin hatch and came in when she told him to, and stood in the hatchway, looking slightly embarrassed. "I wanted to say something," he said. "Okay. What you did at the platform." "You said to Subject Zero." He was turning the empty Vreth scrambler housing over in his hands. He'd given the functional component to the Fleet Weapons Lab, but kept the casing, she noticed. That was, I don't know, accurate. What you said about why we can't be modeled. "You did the actual work," Soren said. "You held the space for me to do the actual work," Morrow said. "That's different, that's—" He stopped. Tried again. "You know what the problem with Subject Zero's model is? It thinks the Mokithfer thing is individual. Person building towards something. But it's not individual." "No," Soren said. "It's the guy carrying the piece of metal, because it feels like it might matter. And it's the commander who knows not to ask why. And it's the prisoner who spent 3 years staying himself enough to matter when it counted. And it's Faro, who noticed the fear patterns in the voice recording. And it's Okafor, who was afraid but came anyway." He turned the casing over once more. "It's not that humans are better than Vreth. It's that when we're together we become something that isn't just the sum." Subject Zero thought it was studying individuals, Soren said. "It was studying the wrong unit," Morrow said. She nodded. She thought about this for a moment, looking at the hatch, which was her habit. "Get some sleep," she said finally. "Frid." He went. She could hear him, faint through the hull, starting up that melody again. The flat chored tune, the one she'd never identified, the one he hummed when he was working. She lay back on her bunk and listened to it until she fell asleep. Outside the viewport, the stars were the same stars they had always been. Subject Zero was out there somewhere, in the dark, ancient and vast, and for the first time in 6,000 years, genuinely unsure of what came next. That seemed, Soren thought, like a reasonable place to start. She closed her eyes. She slept.